when you face the abuse and you realize what was done to you and you really face it, like you look at it, you're like, that sucked. That
Yeah.
was really painful. Like you're
Yeah.
angry, you're sad. You can then start to formulate a new self, right? A new self identification of all the parts of who you really are. And some of them you might love, and some of them you might be like, I didn't realize I was so envious, right? But I also didn't realize I'm so like jovial, right? So you start to have these like realizations with yourself that it's like an awakening. You
Yeah.
get to, when you face abuse, you get to have like a great awakening.
This show is all about helping you up-level your life, including your well-being, your relationships, your mental health, your wealth, your confidence, and your joy. I challenge you to keep an open mind as together we discover tips, tools, and advice from the experts to help you live life to your fullest potential. Welcome to the Jenna Banks Show. Welcome to the Jenna Banks Show. I am Jenna, your host, and I am all about helping you live life to your fullest potential. Now, I hope you'll pardon me today. As you can hear, my voice is a bit crackly. I'm dealing with a bit of a cold, but I'm sure you will forgive me because I definitely did not want to miss filming the show today because I have an amazing guest to bring to you. And this is an important topic that is near and dear to my heart. So my guest today is Kim O'Hara. She is the author of the book titled No Longer Denying Sexual Abuse, Making the Choices That Can Change Your Life. And I wanted to bring this up today because if you have been the victim of abuse yourself, whether it's physical abuse, sexual abuse, or even just mental abuse, and I don't want to say just because mental abuse can be incredibly harmful, but if you've been through any kind of abuse whatsoever, I really hope that you tune into the show today. I really find this topic so incredibly important because especially if you've never gone to seek professional help and fully unearth how the trauma may have impacted your life and the belief system that you formed about yourself as a result of the abuse, then you are doing yourself an incredible disservice. And chances are you may be giving your power away to some of the stories that you formed about yourself as a result of the abuse and as a result of the trauma. I know I've been through it myself. I lived most of my life never having faced the abuse and the trauma that I dealt with as a child, thinking, I've done just fine, thinking I survived, I've done fine financially, I've been able to raise my son, I've been able to do this and that. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I did have to face it. And I think that we all do in some way, shape, or form. So whether we've been self-medicating to kind of squelch dealing with the emotion, or just not even fully understanding, how the trauma and abuse may be affecting us and filtering how we see the world and making us be triggered, which was what was happening to me, unbeknownst to me. I was being triggered constantly as a result of the trauma that I thought, I didn't need to deal with because I was doing fine, right? Well, let me tell you, there is way more to life than just surviving. We all want to thrive, don't we? I would hope that you do. I definitely do. That is my mission, is to help you thrive. So let's go ahead and dive in with my guest today. Again, her name is Kim O'Hara, and just a little bit about her. Besides writing this book that we're going to dive into today, she is also a book coach. I didn't even know a book coach existed. I kind of wish I knew about her a while ago before I started writing my book. Might have made my book journey a lot easier. But she has guided over 40 coaches, leaders, executive clients through the daunting journey of going from book inception to all the way through publication. She can ghostwrite, do developmental editing. She can help you bring your story to life. So let's get into it with Kim. Kim, thank you so much for being here on the show today. Really nice to have you.
So happy to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. Your book and your message is so incredibly powerful. wow, like, wow. It must have taken so much to be able to get to the point where you could have gone through your journey of understanding that you even suffered from abuse, to dealing with it, healing from it, and getting to the
Mhm.
point where now you want to share your message with the world in the form of this beautiful self-help book, right? Because it is more of a self-help than a memoir.
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
So take us back, and just maybe if you would be so kind, I'd love for everyone watching this today to know a little bit more about you at that point where you had that light bulb moment. How did it come to you that you decided, okay, I've been abused
Hmm.
and I'm going to face it, and I'm going to get through this. Like, where were you at that time, and what did that look like?
Yeah, we're talking about denial today, and the book is called "No Longer Denying Sexual Abuse," and making the choices that can change your life. And it's not even just sexual; it's any kind of abuse,
Yeah.
verbal, physical. Being with someone who's abusive in any way, right? Family member, partner, and the denial is really the part that grips us, right? Our
Yeah.
ego keeps us safe because it wants us to not have to open up that can of worms. And yet we're in all these behaviors that aren't really originally who we are. And so the
Mm.
remembering piece, which is the first chapter of my book, because that's when you wake up and you realize it's time, right? And
Yeah.
it's not generally that dramatic. For my case, and what I've heard from a lot of survivors, and I've met a lot of people that have come out of denial, that for me, it was just a very gentle dream where
Mm.
you just could feel the approach of the abuser. You could hear the sounds, you could see the shadows, and I just knew. And this is 25 years prior, someone had actually told me they knew I had been abused, and I ignored it, shut it down, and said, no, nope,
Mhm.
that's not going to happen.
That's denial. Yep.
Yep, no, I'm going to go
Mhm.
do me for the next like 20, that didn't look so pretty, let me tell you.
What
And
did
now,
it look like, Kim? What did it look like not owning it, being in denial? What was your life looking like at that time?
Um, well, I mean, understanding your past is really important so that you can see all the patterns that you took on as someone who was as in abuse, right? Or an abuse survivor, but you didn't face it yet. For me, it was addictions, it was anger, it was a lot of self doubt. It was a lot of big ego and then a lot of self-loathing and like those like massive extremes with nothing really in the middle. And so that was how I had really run for a really long time. Masculine energy. I talk a lot
Mm.
in the book about the masculine energy and not a lot
Mhm.
of the feminine energy. I really didn't understand what that was. Like we have to like, so here I was surviving something I didn't even know what I was surviving. That's
Oh,
the
yeah.
crazy part, right? So
Yeah.
then when you wake up to the abuse, you realize like there's a different way to be a survivor, right? There's a survivor who is now like going to go out and be all these parts of yourself that you've never really tapped into. So
Yeah.
that's really what came with the next stage after you remembered, is really understanding and kind of mourning what was.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned in the beginning that the book isn't just for those who've survived sexual abuse, it's any kind of abuse, right? Mental, whatever. I personally dealt with a lot of mental abuse.
Right.
Well, I had physical abuse, which is
Mhm.
interesting that I've had two different types of abuse from two different types of parents. I had physical abuse from one,
Mm,
and then I went to a home where my mother was mentally abusive.
mm,
And what's interesting is that I've chosen, so I thought the physical abuse was the worst abuse, but come to find out, the more harm was done with the mental abuse, and I had totally just shoved it out of my memory. Didn't think it was a big deal because I thought the physical abuse was the one that did the most harm. But
mhm.
I like how you mentioned that you had a dream, and that's what kind of enlightened you to understanding that there's something here that you need to deal with. For me, I was also having dreams. But my
Wow.
dreams were, it was very strange. I had dreams of these birds, parrots, like in cages, which my mother is very into, these exotic birds, and their beaks would be falling off. But that she had asked me to take care of her birds. For some reason, I was responsible for them, but I had somehow forgotten about them, and they were losing their beaks and they were dying. And so I'd find them and I was like, oh my God, I forgot to take care of these birds. And I feel so bad. And I just try to do what I could to nurse them back to health, but I was worried it was too late. They were just dying. And I'd
Right.
have this as a recurring dream. And what was
Wow.
interesting is I started reading a book about claiming your power. I think it was Maston's Kip, Claim Your Power. And
Mm.
I came to realize that, oh my gosh, I had formed some type of identity, and this is what we're talking about today, is identity formed from abuse, right?
Right.
And what we have, identity is formed from all kinds of things, but the identity we form from abuse, where it's all subconscious. And so
Yes.
subconsciously, when I started doing the work in this particular book, come to find out I had formed all kinds of beliefs about myself as a result of the mental abuse. So the
Right.
mental abuse was worse than the physical for me. Once I faced that and got to the bottom of it and said, okay, I thought out of the abuse that the mental abuse, I had formed beliefs like I am not lovable.
Right. I am not worthy. I am not
Yeah,
capable. I am not enough. Right.
yeah, yeah.
Yes.
And
Yes.
once I faced those and went through the pain, I think that's
Mhm.
part of the
A lot of the
process too.
sorrow, the pain. Yes.
Yeah, and
Yes.
processed
Mhm.
all of that. Then those dreams stopped.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
is it similar? I'm just trying to, I guess, find some similarities here for anyone who
Yeah.
suffered from any kind of abuse. You know, you can't brush it under the rug because it shapes your identity,
Yes,
right?
it does. Well, and I talk a lot in the book, and in general, this has been part of my journey, is getting back to your original identity. You know, when you are abused in any way, whether, and a lot of us, it's when we were younger, right? And
Mhm.
so in those formative years, right, you are trying to come into who you are, but you're relying on, you know, your parents, right, or the
Mhm.
adults around you. And if they have anxiety or they are dysfunctional, and you're being abused on top of it, you're having your trust breached, you're disassociating. And so you don't have like any of those parts of yourself that you would have normally, you know, been born with, right? So
Mhm.
you're like
Mhm.
splitting off. And when you face the abuse and you realize what was done to you and you really face it, like you look at it, you're like, that sucked. That
Yeah.
was really painful. Like you're
Yeah.
angry, you're sad. You can then start to formulate a new self, right? A new self identification of all the parts of who you really are. And some of them you might love, and some of them you might be like, I didn't realize I was so envious, right? But I also didn't realize I'm so like jovial, right? So you start to have these like realizations with yourself that it's like an awakening. You know, you get
Yeah.
to, when you face abuse, you get to have like a great awakening.
Yeah, yeah, it's so true. That's exactly what I went through. And also, you know, it's acceptance. It's saying this is part of who I am. I
Yes.
went through that. I think that through doing that for me, it helped me give validation,
Yes.
right? It
Mhm.
validates you. This is
Mhm.
what I went through. It also, doesn't it give you some self-forgiveness in a way?
Yeah, I mean, I talk a lot about the process of telling others in my book, and I even give like some really good tips on like how you actually go about telling people, right? Because we
Mm.
go through these various stages, right? We get this new voice, right? And we're like, I'm going to go try this out, right? And like, you know, I'd be like telling my like dates on like the second date, you know, I'm going to be, you know, like,
Wow.
they don't really maybe need to know, you know what I
Right,
mean? But
right.
like when you first come into it, you're like liberated. Like you feel like everybody should know, right? Then
Wow.
as time goes on, you start to refine that voice, right? And that goes concurrently with that self-forgiveness, right?
Mm.
The self-forgiveness because there's a part of you that might believe you caused it. I hear a lot of women talk about how they, you know, caused the abuse to happen because they wanted something. So that they went for the payoff. And I'm like, it's never okay for you to be abused. Like it's
Yeah.
never okay. And so they have to like forgive themselves for thinking that about
Mhm.
themselves, and that shame piece, right? And so I do think that, you know, a lot of forgiveness, you come into forgiveness, but in that process, you do have to give it a lot of, like you were saying, a lot of voice.
Mhm. Mhm. I know somebody who went through some sexual abuse by her stepfather,
Mm,
and
mm,
it
mm.
had such a grip on her all of her life.
Yes.
And then the moment she started, so it had power over her, right?
Yes.
It took her power, this shame, this denial took her power. And then when she finally started writing about it and talking about it, she felt her power come back,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. That
She felt
survivor power.
yeah. So by just simply getting to the point where she could talk about it and write about it and
Mhm,
own the
mhm,
story,
mhm.
she felt more energized and more powerful. And then of course, and then she went on to do other, write about it. I think she wrote a book about it. This was many years ago, but that turned on a light bulb for me, understanding that you can give your power away,
Yes.
but it's your power, and how powerful it is when you own the story and you stop denying it, that it can be just so transformational that you can own it and yeah, not let it have power over you anymore. Is that how you felt when you were finally able to grapple with it, talk about it
Mhm,
like you are
mhm.
today? Because you talk about it so like powerfully. Yeah,
Thank
maybe you
you.
could shed a little light on the process for when you started to where
Sure.
you are today, because yeah, you did. I'm sure it wasn't easy to get to this point where you are today.
Yeah, I mean, I've been 10 years in this process, right? So 2012 was when I had the dream, and it has been like a cumulative journey of, you know, having to feel all the sorrow of like realizing that, also like sometimes even having those crazy ideas like, did it even really happen? Like, am I making this up? Like, you know, so
Yeah.
like the counter denial, right? And I've had to look at every part of my life, spirituality, my earning power, my romantic relationships, right? That's taken time over the last 10 years because I've had to try a lot of things on that worked and some didn't work. Originally for me, I would say right around when I had the dream, I had my prior career was ending, my second marriage was ending, I had two little kids, and I was just getting that hint of that intuition that a lot of us as survivors have, that like empathic, intuitive, knowing self. But I didn't understand what it was, but it would start to show up for me. And the one way it would show up was I got a job at Trader Joe's. Like I would never in a million years have thought, after being a movie producer and screenwriter, that I was going to work at Trader Joe's. Not like I'm above it. It just wasn't like I never wanted to work at a supermarket. But
Yeah.
something just told me you have to go work at Trader Joe's. And they happened to have a job the day I went in, which was just totally bizarre, right? And then I like was in this like womb, this like cocoon for 6 months
Mm,
growing. And those are the types of jobs that would just start to show up. It'd be like, go here,
mm,
try here, try there. I was getting sober. So I had this like clarity that I was like, oh my God, I can't hide behind the bottle anymore, you know? And so I was really stepping into a lot of like, who am I, as I was going through a lot of this recovery, to today to become a book coach. I mean, I would have never thought 8 years ago when someone suggested, you know, books, why don't you become a book coach? That I would have this thriving career where I get the privilege every day of helping men and women put their story down on the page for either their business, or they want to write about their legacy, or they want to do like a self-help book that's from their power of their story, not necessarily from abuse, but from like their journey that they've been on. I would
mhm.
have never imagined I would have gotten here. But if you realize, I mean, I've been on this earth 5 decades. The last 8 to 10 have been everything,
Wow. Wow.
everything to me, everything.
It's amazing. I thank you for sharing that Trader Joe's story, because yeah, I can imagine that your ego might get in the way of saying, well, I'm working in the movies and
Yeah.
I'm not that person who works at
Yeah.
Trader Joe's. Isn't that interesting how we wrap our identity up in certain things? But what a gift that was.
It
What a
was
gift
such
that was.
a gift. I mean, to bag groceries and to now, mind you, when I worked in the movies, I was an independent producer. So I did a lot of like lifting on sets and hustling. I was not in the glam paddy wagon or anything. I was like road warrior in indie movies. So it wasn't like out of line to be like hauling pork chops like in a freezer, right?
Right,
But it
right.
still had been so long that I'd actually like, I don't know, it just felt like where I needed to go, you know? And then
Mhm.
after that, I started substitute teaching, which was another divine intervention that came. And then I was with all these children all day and I was able to like heal my inner child. That
Mhm.
sounds so woo woo, but when you've had your childhood taken away from you by sexual abuse and you held that in and didn't tell anybody, and no
Mhm.
one even asked you, saved you, or helped you, when you're in a room with all these young children, you go through some stuff. You're like, oh my
Yeah,
God, like I wasn't 5, I wasn't 8, I wasn't all these things. And so
yeah,
it's like God put me in that. God's like, here's this space. Now here's this
yeah,
space. Now we're going to take you to this space.
yeah.
Sometimes I would willingly go. Sometimes I would kick and scream.
But you listened to the messages and you did it. You did it.
I did.
Yeah, that's
I did.
intuition right there. I talk about that a lot too.
Yeah.
Paying attention to your intuition and doing what feels right is
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
always the way to go. And most
Mm-hmm.
of the time, it doesn't make any sense. Yeah.
Sometimes it does not make, you're like, really? But when it comes with ease and flow and it's
Hmm.
like a quiet, like it's sort of like, how about this? And you're like, because everything for me before I started facing abuse, and even in the first couple years that I was in the process of recovery and therapy, everything in my life was always really hard, right? Like you had to work really hard and everything had to be really hard. You had to like get what you had to get, whatever. And so for me, it wasn't a natural thing to be an acceptance that maybe if it's just supposed to be, it just comes like ease. And that doesn't mean you don't answer the email or you don't show up on time or you don't make the phone call. You've got to be in commitment, right,
Mhm.
to your process. But you also can be committed to the fact that everything I want and need will come to me with ease and grace.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so beautiful. So tell us a little bit about, so you dealt with addiction,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, no, I think you mentioned that you were dealing with that at the same time as
Yes.
facing this abuse. That is so much to go through all at once.
And a divorce and building a new career. Yes, it was
Oh
a
my
lot.
God.
And I had achalasia. So I had an autoimmune disorder where your esophagus stops working.
Oh my
So I had
God.
to go into massive surgery 9 months sober in the middle of all this. And I talk about it in my book because when you are about to be invaded by something like medical, it kicks up all that stuff. Like people are
Mm,
going to go in you. Like you have to trust people, right? And so it was very, very powerful for me to own that time in the hospital and that time, being sober, but having to deal with this, invasion of my body. And I talk about it in the book a lot about taking your body back. So our
mm,
bodies, when we're abused, if it's physical abuse or sexual abuse, and even like you were talking about the mental abuse, that affects us like all over, right?
yeah.
Molecularly, right?
Yeah.
Cellularly, we're affected, right? So you have to like, actually take your body back and tell your body, like, it's gonna be okay. I got you. I got this. Like I'm
Mm,
on this, like
yeah.
I'm not going to what's abandon you again,
Yeah.
because that stuff comes up. Like, did I abandon my body? And I think when we become alcoholics or addicts, we are abandoning our bodies.
Yeah, that's amazing. You went through so, so much and came out the other side in such a powerful way, to be able to own your story,
Mm-hmm.
write about it, all of that. I mean, I can imagine that anybody watching this right now might, and if you haven't even gone to the point of getting over denial, right? You're still in denial. Gosh, that's got to be scary. Like, what kind of advice would you give to somebody who is in that position right now where maybe they know that something's happened, but like me, for example, however many years ago, before I realized that, before I stopped being in denial about my mental abuse and the harm and effect that that had on me, what would be even the beginning point of someone to just start to kind of explore that and see if
Right.
there's something there. Because, for example, I want to preface that by saying, I thought because I survived
Mm-hmm.
and that I was doing well in
Mm-hmm.
life
Mm-hmm.
on all,
Mm-hmm.
from the outside point of view, I was doing fine financially. I seemed to have my life together, but I'd never faced the abuse and dealt with it and owned it and understood the trauma that came from that.
Right.
That, where, what would you say to somebody who is, currently in that mode that I was in,
Right.
before facing
Absolutely.
it? Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of women and men out there that are very successful that have not really faced the abuse, and for a variety of reasons. Maybe they don't know where to start. Maybe they're afraid of, the tumbling down of everything. But I would say that if you have this idea that there's more that you can have in your life, right? And you feel that there's parts of yourself, like maybe you're angry, maybe you are in fear a lot more than you'd like to be. Maybe you have thoughts of like, paranoia, or like, that you think the world's a little bit against you, or you have these things going on with yourself that you're like, where would that, like, why would that be happening? Those are all tendrils and little like hot pockets of unfaced abuse, right?
Mm.
So a therapist is going to do a fantastic job to help you pull that out. I have a whole chapter on therapy because I think it's really important. As a friend of mine says, you can talk to your girlfriends about your stuff, but there's nothing like seeing somebody who's got a degree on the wall. And
Right.
that is true because that's their job. Like that's a self-honoring thing to do, is to go talk to somebody and really start to unearth like what is here? Like is there trauma? Generally, if you think you've been abused, and even if it hasn't been corroborated, you have been. You have to trust that. It's not just something you're going to like come up with one day because it's like a good storyline.
Yeah, and you know what else is something, I'm still on my journey. I learn new things all the time.
Mhm.
I've come to the understanding that we can be triggered
Yes.
as a result of the abuse or neglect or trauma or whatever, and we can blame that on others, right? So
Yeah.
basically what triggering is let's say somebody does something unintended to harm you or anything like that, and you get triggered based on that behavior. Meanwhile, they're not intending to do anything to upset you,
Mhm.
but it triggers you, and you can only see it through the filter of that trigger. And we blame others. I've seen it time and time again. Now that I'm awake to it, I see it all over the place. That
Yes.
person's obviously triggered. That other person didn't do anything to cause any harm to them, but all they see is, you did this to me, you did that, why are you doing that? And and we might be really nice, good people, right? Genuinely great people, and still lash out because we're being triggered, and not realize that we're actually, harming our relationships, harming our own life,
Mhm.
holding ourselves back by not even understanding how the beliefs that we formed as a result of the trauma cause these triggers in our life, right?
Right. Right. I mean, those triggers came up for me the most in the relationships where I felt love, right? So to love another person means you have to trust, you have to let down walls, right? My children, or my two daughters, are the areas where I practice that the most, right? Being able to not be triggered, allowing myself to be the adult in the situation,
Mm.
guiding them, showing them what a life without abuse looks like, passing down a healthier generational mother-daughter relationship. And then the other area where it happened was romantic relationships. I've had to walk through a fair amount of romantic relationships in the last 8 years to look at those triggers you're talking about. Like, I don't want to be abandoned, but I also
Mm.
don't want to be like necessarily like I had to face that, I can like just check out. I could be like one and done, like I could be gone. Like, but
Yeah.
then at the same time, I don't want you to leave me, and I want you to love me, and I want to be able to trust you. And I've had to look at this, and this has just been in the last year, until I am 100% whole. And that doesn't mean I don't need other people, but just until I'm 100% whole, I cannot expect that other person to fill that hole that was created by abuse, that need to know because you see me, I'm seen. I
Yeah.
need to see me as the whole self first. And that is the master's program of survival from abuse right there.
I love that you said that. You
Yeah.
know, I think that's so important to highlight that we need to be able to be whole on our own.
Mhm.
I also feel like I looked for someone else to be that other half, to
Yeah.
be, we're, no fault to us, we're raised that way,
Right.
right? We're
Right.
raised to think that once you find a partner, then it's you two are one. And I have a whole different belief system around that now, which is you need to be whole on your own. You need to be a whole person on your own because that person can never, you know,
They're just another human. They're
yeah,
just and they've got their own stuff,
that's
right? And
right.
so
That's
then you get
right.
into that, like, you can be with a partner where you both help each other's stuff, sure. But as an abuse survivor, you come with like an extra heavy sort of bag of stuff, right?
Mhm.
It's like very tender. And yes, you can expect your partner to know that about you, but really in reality, like it's your responsibility. Like I'm a very spiritual person. I believe, in God, and I spend a lot of time talking to God and asking for strength and asking to keep me believing that I am with myself and with God, not alone, that I am safe and I'm whole and I'm good. And then I could bring in like compassion and kindness toward maybe someone I'm with is behaving in a way that annoys me. Well, that doesn't mean that there's this like bigger, you know, thing going on that they're like,
Yeah.
they're out to get me,
Yeah. 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 It's so true. No, I was literally just thinking about these the other day about how the fact that I am a whole person, that
Yeah.
I don't look for someone to make up for something that I'm lacking. So I don't
Hmm.
look to my partner to make up for that. And as a result, I can give him the compassion
Right.
and true love that he deserves. That is truly giving love when you are not needy and looking to them to make up for something that you really need to be giving yourself, because ultimately at the end of the day only you know exactly what you need and only you can give it to you the
Yes.
way you need it. But if no one's talking about this and we're all we get are the movies and the vision of romantic love and
Right.
all
Right.
of that, that's the only programming we have, but it's a fallacy. It's not true. We have
Right.
everything we need within us, whether or not we are with somebody. It doesn't matter. If anything, a
Hmm.
relationship only serves to give us a great big mirror.
Yes, it's true. It's miracle grow for our defects, right?
Yeah.
When you
Yeah.
enter a relationship, like you can see all the things, like how badly you want to be loved, right? Like
Yeah.
how badly you want to be loved, right? And that person is either capable of coming to the table with that, or you're able to like get in touch more with your own self-love. And you know I think really for me in the last year, I have been in so many beautiful situations with women and other
Mm,
women and
yeah.
expanding my female circle. I've
Good for
always had
you.
good female friends, but like even you and I attracting to each other, and like
Mhm.
this is what's starting to show up in my life is these deeper conversations on a higher level where we're committed to going out and saying to other women, and men, but saying primarily to women, like,
Yeah.
come on, come with us. Like, let's
Mhm.
go. Like, we're out here with businesses, we're buying houses, we're meeting partners, we're having these great conversations. Let's do this, right? Let's
Yeah.
not be
Yeah.
sad anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And yes, I don't want to open up the can of worms, but like we're not meant to give our power over to a man. We're not.
No,
Like
right.
we need
This
to be
is,
in our
yeah.
power. It's true. I
Yeah,
mean,
we're
it,
tribal through and through as women. Like, we're
mhm,
tribal. Like,
mhm.
that's really what I've come up with in the last year is I'm like 87% of my time could be with like my women people. And like the
Yeah.
last percentage, like I'll be like with like, my dude, like whatever. But my children are in that as my
Yeah,
women, right? They're my
exactly.
girls, they're like my ride and die girls, so they're part of that.
Well, we are so powerful as women. And if we wrap all of our identity up in supporting a man, how is that going to further our life? How is that going to support the women in our lives? We need to be giving some of our power and energy into supporting
Right.
our purpose, what we're here on earth to do, bringing that more of that female energy
Female energy.
into
Mhm.
everything, right? Into tech jobs, into the boardrooms, into
Yes.
government, into everything. Our
Buying
energy needs to go.
property.
Exactly. Our energy needs to go into more than just, supporting a man and his aspirations. We need to see
Right.
more women doing things like, being president of the US or any other country,
Yes, yes,
being the
yes.
famous artist, being the famous music, all of that. We need more women doing all of that. So, and we need to heal ourselves and get
Mhm.
beyond this trauma that's keeping us small, keeping our light dim, keeping our power away from us so that we can be more empowered and do more amazing things in this world, lift each other up as women so that we can truly thrive, right?
Yes, 100%. Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
we are on the same page, mama. Well, I think that's a really good place to bring this to a close, especially because I am dealing with a cold and now my voice has decided to get crackly. So I guess that's God, the universe telling us it's time to say goodbye to everybody. So, Kim, I really appreciate you coming on the show today and sharing your incredible story. Could you please tell everybody how they can connect with you, as well as, a little bit more about the work that you do in case anyone else watching this today has an idea for a book, has a story, a business journey, anything like that that they may want to bring to light and have someone like you to hold their hand and walk them through the process.
Absolutely. Well, I'm a book coach and I help high achieving men and women that have a book inside of them, whether it's just they want to get their story down on the page or they have a business and they really want to kind of show how they've come to their expertise and have that unique vision and purpose and mission that they can put out into the world with that book. So you can find me at kimohara.com and you can sign up for my column. I'm a writer, so I write and I write funny column every Sunday that you might enjoy. And you can also find me on Instagram at Kim O'Hara Coach. And I would love if you yourself are struggling with abuse, or if you know anybody that's struggling with abuse, to look for my book and purchase it. No longer denying sexual abuse, making the choices that can change your life. That would be a great way to help change the world.
And y'all, listen to this. So Kim and I talked earlier, and she mentioned that if anyone does decide to work with her, you send someone her way, she will, and it comes as a result of this show, she will in turn, instead of sending a referral fee or something like that, which a lot of people would do, she will donate a bunch of books back to the show, which we can in turn give to other abuse survivors, other victims who really
Mhm.
need her message, so we can continue to keep doing some amazing good in the world and spread her message and help us all move beyond, victim status and denial and having our power away from us and take our power back so that we can do more amazing good in the world and lift other women up and just up humanity in general. It's not just
Mhm.
women, because if us women can heal ourselves and be in our power, we can do the entire world so much more good. So definitely reach out to Kim if anything here today has inspired you, or at the very least, pick up a copy of her book, give it as a gift to somebody, and let's get this world healed, y'all. Okay, Kim, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
If you would like to connect with me on social media or get my newsletter or anything like that, visit my website, which is jenna-banks.com. Again, jenna-banks.com. There you'll also find a link to my free service, which is titled Love Notes to Myself. It is a daily self-love reminder to help give you some really great positive affirmations and self-love reminders first thing in the morning. It takes less than a minute to read. I'd like to thank you for tuning in today and would definitely encourage you to stay tuned to future episodes of The Jenna Banks Show, because I have so much more to share with you about how we can truly live our lives to our fullest potential. Thanks so much for tuning into the show today. And remember, your love is your power. Until next time.